Alright guys, so in today's video we are going to be talking about the future of PlayStation and if you should be worried. Currently, I'm a little bit worried, and I'm getting more worried as time goes on and the more I hear about Sony's live service future, basically. I'm not completely scared yet. Let's just say I'm still hopeful, but there's definitely some worrying signs coming. So we're going to take a look at what Sony has said regarding games as a service, and we're going to look to the future to see what their studios are currently working on or what they could potentially be working on within the next few years. Kind of just get a gauge on the future of PlayStation for the next few years, basically. So first off, I kind of just want to do a quick unscripted overview of what's going on with Sony right now. The future just seems to be leaning towards live service games a little bit. They've talked about planning to switch to 50%, 60% live service games within the next few years, basically by the end of 2025, I think that would be, which is kind of scary news to hear right off the rip. I do think there's a little bit more complications to it than that. There's a little bit more nuance and context to it that we're gonna dive into it a little bit. But to me, the PlayStation that I love is the great single player exclusives like God of War and Horizon and stuff like that, that they will no doubt continue to work on, but probably less. Like, we'll see less of these big single player games, and I feel like it kind of limits creativity from first party as well. Like, we're not going to get games like we had on previous generations, like smaller titles, like even like shooters like Killzone and Resistance. We haven't seen anything like that since those games stopped being made, basically, and it's just a little bit worrying that we're not seeing that variety of game, because they kind of have their niche and they're just sticking to that now. But now that they're finally actually kind of coming away from it, it's going just in live service games with new IPs and stuff like that, and that's what worries me the most, because we, over the last few years, we have got some really great smaller titles from Sony through like PlayStation Plus Extra. Like, we had Chia, we had, which I think is a great game. I need to get back to playing that. I think it's a fun little title. We had Stray, which was nominated for Game of the Year awards. I don't think it was that good, but I did enjoy Stray. And then just recently we've had Humanity as well, which I think is a really cool little Lemmings style puzzle game. And I just want to see more games like that continue to come to PlayStation, as well as their big titles and as well as their live service titles. And I hope that this kind of 60-40 split between live service games and first party like big single player games doesn't like leave those games on the wayside, is what I'm hoping. By the way, PlayStation Plus Extra and Premium getting like much better value by the day. I feel like they're actually turning into quite the deal, like Game Pass. But anyway, enough of that. I feel like we're going to talk a little bit about the showcase now. Well, not really the showcase, because I've already covered that, but what the showcase entails. Like, this was kind of the chance for Sony to show the start of the new era of Sony, and they've done it with limited gameplay. They've done it with CGI trailers for live service games, mainly. Like, they showed 4 first party games, 3 of them were live service, and the other one we already knew about, which was Spider-Man, and Spider-Man looks great, but the live service games, they didn't even show any gameplay. I mean, Marathon, that's going to be great, I'm sure. Fair Games looks like it could be interesting, who knows. I just feel like overall it was a little bit of a disappointment, because they didn't show their big hitters. They didn't show Death Stranding 2, they didn't show Rise of the Ronin, Ghost of Tsushima 2, the new Uncharted game. Like, where was all of this stuff? Like, are they planning to show that at a different showcase? Are they planning to show that at the Summer Games Fest? Like, they have to do something else, I feel like, to show what their other big studios are working on, because we know that they're working on certain stuff that we haven't seen recently. So unless that stuff is just way out there in the future, which I don't believe is the case, I don't know, it's just kind of a little bit disappointing that the showcase focused so much on third-party stuff and not really at all on what they're doing with first party, because I was most excited to see what they're doing with first party next. Yeah, it kind of just seemed like the showcase was the beginning of something, and the numbers that Sony have talked about are a little bit worrying. So let's go over those. So here we have some numbers that would generally get me like pretty excited. So Sony in fiscal year 2019 we're working on 80% existing IPs, 20% new IPs. Then by fiscal year 23, they want to be working on 60% existing, 40% new IPs. And then by fiscal year 25, it's 50-50. And that alone is like great. New IPs. I love new IPs. I want to see more cool new single player games and different types of IPs from Sony studios rather than just rehashing the same franchises over and over again. But then you look into why that's happening, and that's happening because they're releasing lots of new live service franchises. Basically, like they're creating new games that aren't really tied to anything. Like, we'll look at this here. In fiscal year 2019, they were working on 88% single player games, 12% live service games, and then it's already in 2023 they want it to be 55% live service, 45% single player games, traditional games is what they say, and then by fiscal year 25 they want it to be 60% live service and 40% traditional. And that to me is just a little bit concerning, because if Sony are banking this big on live service, then that is just not a good indicator for the future of the industry, to me at least, because the games that I love personally the most, I know a lot of people like probably only play live service games. Like a lot of people that play casually, they just play the Call of Duties, they play the Fortnites, and they play the new shooters that come out, and that's that. They don't play the single player games, and that's the thing that works. But then you look at the sales of some of Sony's big flagship titles and you wonder why they have to do this at all. Like you see how well Horizon is selling, you see how well God of War is selling, and you're kind of just left a little bit perplexed at why they would go so far in the other direction when this is what got them the success that they have right now. Like the games like Horizon, God of War, Uncharted, The Last of Us, Death Stranding, these are the games that made PS4 so successful, that made the start of PS5 so successful. And the fact that they just change up the numbers this much is a little bit kind of confusing to me. Like, I would say if they want to get more into live service, fair enough. I do think like that is a legitimate critique of Sony, is that they don't have enough of those. They don't have enough good multiplayer games. They don't have enough good first-person shooters, and that's fair. I feel like they should have more of those, but you don't want to just go fully in that direction then, you know? You want to kind of branch off, and I know it's 60-40, but it's like they're going more live service than traditional already. It just seems a little over the top. From 12% to 60% in the space of 6 years, that seems like a big jump, and a worrying one as well. So now we're going to kind of talk about Sony's studios, and we're going to go through studio by studio to see what each team is working on, or what we can speculate that they will be working on. So we'll see how many of these are live service versus single player games, and we're going to go in alphabetical order. So we're going to start with Sony Bend. So this one is an interesting one because we don't currently know what they're working on, but we do know they wanted to work on Days Gone 2, but it didn't get the green light, unfortunately, because I really like Days Gone actually, and I think it does deserve a sequel, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So this actually caused a lot of animosity between Bend and Sony, and eventually led to quite a few exits from the studio as well, including studio leads John Garvin and Jeff Ross. So this one I do feel sad about, because Days Gone wasn't perfect, there's no doubt about that, but I think it deserved a sequel, and a sequel with a few tweaks here and there could have been really fucking great in my opinion. Now, I still haven't had a gameplay experience like the Horde since I played Days Gone. Like, that was just an absolutely intense and awesome rush of blood to do those hordes like that. And Days Gone, you know, it was Ben's first game on PS4, and really their first chance to flex their muscles in game development for a long time, because they were working on PSP games, they were working on Vita games beforehand. I just think that they showed enough promise with this game to get a sequel greenlit. I think that they deserved that chance, at least if they wanted to. Now, I could understand Sony's decision if it was critically and commercially hated, but people love Days Gone outside of the media, and it sold really well, and apparently we could have had the sequel by now. It would be out by now. It had got greenlit when they wanted to make it, according to a Days Gone director, that is. Now, surely that would have been preferable to the messy situation that we got, and you know, the fact that it sold so well and it seemed to resonate with a lot of people. Like, obviously it was a mixed reception critically, but I feel like a lot of the general public really liked this game. So I just wish it would have got another shot. You know, I think they deserve that, but we know Bend Studio are now working on a new open world game that isn't Days Gone 2. Although I did see on Twitter recently, there was a brief rumor that Days Gone 2 had started development, but it was also from the same source that said that CD Projekt Red is joining Sony, which has been proven to be not the case since. So I don't think that that's a legitimate source. And sorry for rambling about this one. I'm pretty passionate about this one because I really did enjoy Days Gone a lot. But I'll be keeping my eye on what Bend are doing next. There's no doubt about that. We kind of started with a little bit of a banger there. But yeah, let's go on to the next studio for Sony, which is Bluepoint Games. So Bluepoint is one of Sony's newest acquisitions, and before now, they've mainly just worked on remakes. Brilliant ones, mind you. Honestly, they've just only put out bangers, it seems like. Now, the Shadow of the Colossus remake is downright incredible. I absolutely love that game. They've also worked on the Uncharted collection, which is one of my favorite franchises of all time. And then they did the Demon Souls remake, which I think was it a launch game for PS5? I'm pretty sure, or it was around launch anyway, if it wasn't a launch game. But Bluepoint are now currently working on an original game, which means that they are getting a crack at a game of their own that's not a remake. So it's either a new IP completely or a new game for an existing franchise. Now, there has been some speculation that it could be the new Uncharted game, and I kind of like that idea, honestly. Considering they have history with the franchise, working on the collection, I think that it just makes sense. So I think that I'd like to see them get a shot on Uncharted and see if they can really be successful with their own game. So we're gonna go through 20 studios, by the way. I think I mentioned that, but there's 20 first-party studios that Sony are currently overseeing, and we're going to talk about all of them. Some of them we'll only be doing a couple lines on, but we'll be going more in depth with other ones. Now, the next one is Firesprite Games. This is a studio based out of Liverpool in the UK, where my toffees are from. Up the fucking toffees, lads. But this studio was actually created by former employees of Sony Liverpool, which was shut down in 2012. Sony picked the team up in 2021, and it's now their largest UK studio, which is cool. So these guys have previously worked on Persistence, Playroom VR, and also helped Guerrilla launch Horizon Call of the Mountain. So they've been quite involved in the virtual reality side of things, and they're apparently working on a dark story-driven horror game. Whether that's VR or not remains to be seen, and they are also working on a new multiplayer project that we don't know much about besides the fact that it's an action game. So far, it seems like there's going to be 3 single-player games, 1 live service game, so the ratio is looking good so far, and it probably will look okay based on the 20 studios that we're going into, because obviously this is the end of 2025 that they want to be working on 60% live service games, so it's not going to be 60% right now. Now, the next one is Firewalk Games, so Firesprite onto Firewalk. This was actually probably one of the most recent studios that was picked up. This was picked up this year with pretty much very little known about them. We know that they have some studio leads who have previously worked at Bungie, Respawn, Raven, and more. So yeah, all that experience should help with their new multiplayer game, one of the new 12 live service games coming by 2025, and that is Concord. They announced this at the PlayStation showcase, and we really don't know anything about it other than that it's a first-person shooter, and we saw like a CGI trailer. It didn't really show too much, so we can't really speculate on it. I don't feel like it didn't really show enough, but we know that it's a multiplayer game, and it's coming in 2024 or 2025. And now we move on to Guerrilla Games. So this is one of my favorite studios that PlayStation own, if not flat out my favorite right now, and I've personally always been a big Guerrilla fan. Huge Killzone fan back in the day. Even Killzone Shadowfall I really enjoyed, which would end up being the last Killzone they worked on to date, as they made the switch to the Horizon franchise. So they released Zero Dawn in 2017 and Forbidden West last year in 2022 to critical and commercial success on both occasions. So as you do when you find a gold mine, you plan to milk it for all it's worth, baby. So we've got Horizon VR games coming, we've got mobile games coming, we've got MMO games coming, you name it, we've got a Horizon game coming for it. Fighting games? Sure, why not? Who gives a damn? Whatever it is, we'll bring a Horizon game for it. And yeah, that's what scares me a little bit about this, because I do think that Horizon is a phenomenal franchise, and I think that some of the ideas outside of the mainline games are good ideas, but there is a thing called too much of a good thing, and that's looking like what could happen here, and it's a bit scary. I'm hoping not though, because the Forbidden West game was one of my favorite games in a very long time, honestly, and I just completed the Burning Shores DLC, so I really can't wait to see how it all finishes up in the third game. I'm assuming that it's going to be, well, we know it's going to be a trilogy, but I think that 3 is going to be the last mainline game there as well, but there is talk about Guerrilla working on a new co-op Horizon game, which could be the Monster Hunter style game we've heard about for this one, which I actually do think that could work really well for this franchise, because the combat is incredible, and the robot dino enemies, they're pretty damn cool too. So I think that style of game could definitely work for this franchise. Now, like, I'm not really that into Monster Hunter or Wild Hearts, but I could 100% see myself really enjoying a Horizon game like that, because the problems I have with those games is I just really don't enjoy the combat that much. Like, I feel like with Horizon it would be really cool. But we don't know too much about that yet. Is that counted as a live service game because it's co-op? I don't know, probably not, but we shall see. I'd love to see them eventually bring back Killzone in some capacity as well, but that seems pretty unlikely at this point. I think that they would revive maybe SOCOM or Resistance even before then. Who knows? It seems like Guerrilla are all tapped out working on Horizon games. So yeah, it's a little bit of a shame, but I mean, it is what it is. Horizon is phenomenal as well. I'm glad they made it, because I love that franchise. All right, sixth studio we are going to talk about is Haven Studio. So this one we don't currently know a lot about, except for the fact that Jade Raymond will be leading the studio. She's previously worked on Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs, and we know that this game will be one of the 12 live service multiplayer games, but that's pretty much it. And we'll move straight on to the next studio, which is Housemarque. So they are based in Finland, and they've made a lot of great smaller titles like Resogun, which would be my personal favorite on, I think that was a PS4 launch game. I absolutely adored that game. I was addicted to it. I played it so much. But they've also made some top-down twin stick shooters like Dead Nation and Alien Nation. Not really my thing, but their most recent title is probably their most ambitious, with Returnal. So this is a really tough third-person roguelike game, and I played a few hours of this game, and it does play really well, but it's also incredibly difficult. So I think I would need to play in co-op, at least for me to get through it without losing my mind. I just don't have the patience for these kind of things sometimes. Now, we do know Housemarque are starting work on their next game, but we don't know anything about it. It could potentially be Returnal 2, but highly unlikely given that they pretty much never make sequels. Maybe there's an exception for Returnal, who knows, but a new IP is probably more likely.
Future Turloch here as well. I forgot to mention that obviously their game was announced at the PlayStation Showcase, and it was that Fair Games game. We got a CGI trailer. We know that it's a heist game, and it's coming probably next year, or yeah, I would assume probably next year. So apologies for that. I forgot to mention that like this was one of the games showed off at the showcase, and yeah, we do know a little bit more about it than we did previously. I just completely forgot to link those two together, so apologies on that.
Now, let's talk about Sony's most important studio right now, and that is Insomniac Games. And I would say that they're probably their most important studio by quite some margin at the moment. The quality games that they're producing in a quick period of time is absolutely huge for Sony. On PS5 already, they've released Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, Spider-Man Remastered, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. They've been working with Sony for quite some time already, even before the acquisition was started. They worked with them with Spyro and Ratchet & Clank on PS1 and PS2. I'm a big fan of Spyro, by the way. I absolutely loved Spyro back in the day. They also worked on Resistance back on PS3, which was one of my favorite shooters of that era, along with Killzone. So yeah, Insomniac have been a big part of PlayStation's history, and they continue to put in work with Marvel's Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine in the works. So yeah, Spider-Man coming later this year, and it looks great from the showcase that we saw. And Wolverine, we haven't seen pretty much anything about that that yet. We just saw the reveal trailer. That'll probably be coming in 24 or 2025. Knowing Insomniac's rate, though, it'll probably come out next year. So yeah, we already know what Insomniac are working on. I don't think there's really any room for surprises on what they're doing, and I'm pretty excited about both titles, honestly. So yeah, as I said, Spider-Man looked great at the showcase, and I'm sure Wolverine will be great as well. But I just hope they don't become the Marvel only studio. That is the one thing that worries me, because Ratchet and Clank and Resistance are great franchises too, and I'd love to see them get a chance to do something else. Maybe a Resistance comeback, even with a little collection from someone else would be nice if they're not going to work on it, or a new IP entirely would be cool as well, like an original new IP. That would be cool as well. But we'll see what Insomniac do over the next few years. Their output is insane, so it'll be interesting to see what they can do. So next up is London Studio. They really haven't worked on too many big games in the past. They've worked on titles like iPet and Blood and Truth, which was a PSVR title, and their next game is apparently an online co-op combat game set in modern fantasy London. So this will be a PS5 game and a brand new IP. Most likely this is another one of the live service games, and the art style they showed looks pretty damn weird from what we saw in the picture. Hopefully Sanakagy can get a picture of that art style up on the screen right now for you guys to look at. But yeah, this could be an interesting one to keep an eye out for, but not enough here to really get a good idea of what the game is, or to even remotely start getting excited yet. Now on to studio number 10. We're into the double digits already, which is crazy. We're going to talk about Media Molecule. So Media Molecule has been working on Dreams for the past 7 years or so, and it's finally coming to an end in September as support for the game is winding down. So yeah, Dreams really can only be described as an abject failure, I would say, and I'm hoping that Media Molecule can get back on track working on a new game later this year. I do think that Dreams was a really interesting and unique idea, but it's just not something that people want to play, really, you know. So and Media Molecule have made games that are really fun to play before. They have, for sure. Like Little Big Planet was a franchise on PS3 that I actually really loved. I played the shit out of those games in co-op with my dad and my brother, and just kind of having fun with them and doing the creative tracks that they did as a part of the game rather than like making it the whole game was really cool in Little Big Planet as well. So we probably won't know what's next for Media Molecule in the foreseeable future. We'll see maybe in a couple of years or so what they're going to be working on next, because obviously they're still working on Dreams currently until September at least, and then after that they'll be able to start on a new game. Now next up is Naughty Dog, definitely one of Sony's biggest studios and one of the best, I would say, as well. So but yeah, Naughty Dog are the creators of some of my favorite games ever, like The Last of Us and Uncharted, and they've also worked on games like Crash Bandicoot and Jak and Daxter in the past, of course. So yeah, Naughty Dog are absolutely behemoths in this industry, and they're currently apparently working on Factions, but we of course recently got some interesting news about that one as well. So they're winding down support for that game to focus more on their next single player game, which will either be The Last of Us Part 3 or a brand new IP, and it just kind of depends which one they want to do first, I guess. So the Faction news overall was disappointing, as we pretty much expected to see that at the showcase. I was like pretty much guaranteed that was going to be at the showcase, with the potential release date for this year as well as what I was expecting. But apparently Bungie, who are testing the game as, you know, the masters of creating multiplayer games, they raised issues about the longevity of the game and basically how fun it would be over a long period of time. So while this news is disappointing, obviously I'd personally be way more excited about the single player stuff anyway. So if this gets the single player stuff out to us faster, I'm okay with it, and hopefully this is kind of maybe the start of a realization that they shouldn't go full multiplayer, full live service, you know, and the fact that people want single player games more than this kind of stuff, you know. Like I think if you ask someone what would they be more excited for, The Last of Us Part 3 or The Last of Us Factions, I'm pretty sure like 80% of people would say The Last of Us Part 3. At least 80% of people, by the way. So doing it with existing franchises like The Last of Us is an interesting tactic, but I think overall they're making like the right decision here to focus more on the single player game. Hopefully Factions will still come out and be great. We don't know. I don't think they're canceling the game or anything like that. I think they're just kind of reevaluating evaluating it. But it's a shame because it did really seem like there was some interesting stuff in the works for Factions, and hopefully we can still get it early next year in a new and improved way, or maybe sometime in the distant future as well in an improved way. We'll see what happens with Factions. We don't know, and we'll see what happens with Naughty Dog and what they're going to make next. I would like to see the new IP first, personally. I do think that The Last of Us Part 3 has to happen, but I think I'd like to see the new IP before we see The Last of Us Part 3. So next up is Nixxes. This one was just purchased for porting games from PS5 to PC, so we're just going to skip over them as they're not really working on any new games at all. They're literally just a porting studio. So next up is Polyphony Digital. Now this is one of Sony's 2 Japanese studios, and this one is known for making Gran Turismo, the absolutely massively popular racer, one of the best-selling games in PlayStation history, and one of my favorites too. I've loved Gran Turismo since I was a kid, and I think Gran Turismo 7 is absolutely brilliant as well. I've been playing that periodically throughout the PS5's life cycle since it came out. I haven't played it as much recently. I want to get back into it a little bit, but yeah, they won't be working on anything else for this foreseeable future, as they'll continue to work on Gran Turismo 7 before probably eventually moving on to working on the next one. But we are getting a Gran Turismo movie though, which is going to be interesting. I actually thought the trailer looked kind of cool. Like, I was expecting it to be really stupid and garbage, but I like the fact that it's based on a true story, and I thought that it looked interesting. The trailer definitely got me a little bit intrigued. All right, next up is San Diego Studio. I mean, they're already working on one of these live service games, or multiple of these live service games for Sony, as they do MLB The Show. So MLB The Show 23, I don't know if that counts as one of the live service games, or if they're counting every MLB The Show that comes out every year as one of the live service games towards the 12. I'm sure this will count towards that in some capacity. And I've actually got into MLB quite a bit, and I think it's a lot of fun. I've been really enjoying learning baseball and learning the game as well. Now, there was also some rumors about this team that they could be the studio working on the Uncharted game. So I think this one and Bluepoint are the most likely candidates, but there hasn't really been an update in quite some time, and Uncharted hasn't officially been unveiled yet. I thought it would be at the showcase, as they've been teasing it, but apparently not. We're just going to wait and see on Uncharted, I guess. Next up is Santa Monica Studio, another one of Sony's bigger studios currently, as they're working on the super popular God of War franchise. The most recent game, Ragnarok, getting widespread support commercially and critically, just a smash hit. I absolutely love the game myself as well, and I'm very intrigued to see what they do next, because we know that that was the end of the Norse saga, and we know Cory Barlog is working on a new game entirely, but we don't know what that is yet. And with God of War, like, what direction will it go now that the Norse storyline is over? Like, will we get an Atreus game in a new location? Will we get a new Kratos adventure somewhere else? I just think that there's so many unanswered questions with Santa Monica Studio, but hopefully they'll keep making great single player games like Ragnarok and God of War, because those are 2 of Sony's very best games. Honestly, masterpieces, I would class those games as. Next up is Savage Game Studios. They're working on an online mobile game apparently. I don't care whatsoever about this one, so I'm just going to move straight on to the next one. Now, we're making our way through this. We're already up to studio number 17. So yeah, Sucker Punch are studio 17. And yeah, I'm really excited about Sucker Punch's future. They've previously worked on Infamous, Ghost of Tsushima, and Sly Cooper. Ghost of Tsushima, of course, being their most recent game. Now, I've never actually played Sly Cooper myself, but I really did like Ghost of Tsushima, and I really liked Infamous as well back in the day. Even the most recent Infamous, which I know was a little bit more mixed on PS4, I really liked. I thought that was great too. But the success of Ghost of Tsushima means it's highly likely that we'll get a sequel to that. There's nothing confirmed on that yet, but I think we can pretty much have a safe assumption that that's going to be the case. But I hope that they can do some other stuff on top of that within the next years as well. To see them bring back Infamous would be interesting, or maybe a new IP entirely. So I hope that they just they get a chance to do something else as well as Ghost of Tsushima, you know. But I don't know how big the studio is, whether they can break off into 2 games, who knows. We'll see what happens, but I'm excited for Ghost of Tsushima 2 anyway. I know people love Ghost of Tsushima. I did really like it as well. I wouldn't say I'm kind of as high on it as some other people, but I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to the sequel for sure. All right, next up is Team Asobi. Now, they have mainly worked on Astro games. Most recently, they've worked on Astro's Playroom on PS5, and it's likely that they'll continue this trend with a PSVR 2 game, but we don't have anything other than they're working on a 3D action game right now. You'd have to assume that that will be, an Astros game, but we don't, as I said, know anything about that yet, so we'll have to wait and see on that one. So next up, the 19th studio, the penultimate studio that we're going to talk about is Valkyrie Entertainment. They're actually just a support studio, so I don't have too much to say about them. They've worked on the God of War titles, and they're currently working on an unannounced strategy title that we know nothing about, and some other smaller titles as well, like some mobile stuff and shit that we don't really know too much about. So it'll be interesting to see what they're helping with, because obviously if they can help with God of War, maybe they're the glue that keeps it all together there, makes those God of War games so great. Who knows? But yeah, the unannounced strategy game kind of piqued my interest a little bit, but I'm not that into strategy games anyway. I just kind of want to know what it is. And yeah, last and probably least, no, I'm just kidding, not least, XDev are the final studio we're going to talk about, also based in Liverpool, England, and they're a studio that works with third parties to help them. So yeah, they previously have worked on Until Dawn and Detroit Become Human, which were both fucking awesome games, by the way. Until Dawn, incredibly great horror game, and Supermassive have been trying to recreate that since and just haven't come close. I would say the closest they got was The Quarry, but it's still nowhere near the caliber of Until Dawn. And don't get me started on those Dark Pictures games. They're just distinctly average, I would say, and they're just not on the tier of Until Dawn at all. And yeah, I think that was partly due to Sony's backing there, and maybe it was partly due to the XDev team as well. Who knows? And Detroit Become Human, I mean, I love all of David Cage's recent games anyway. I love Beyond Two Souls, I love Detroit Become Human, I love Heavy Rain, and I'm excited to see what he does next. It probably won't be with Sony. It seems like they had some bad times. They had some animosity between Sony and David Cage and stuff like that. So it's a shame that they couldn't work that out, because I think that would have been a really smart acquisition for Sony as well if they had bought Quantic Dream. But c'est la vie. This is what happens. And this is the way that it is. But also, they are currently working on Rise of the Ronin. This is XDev, sorry, are currently working on Rise of the Ronin and Stellar Blade. Now, Rise of the Ronin, to me, from the trailer that we got, looks really good. But I don't know a lot about Stellar Blade. I'm hoping that we see more about Rise of the Ronin soon. I was hoping that we'd see it at the showcase, but we didn't. So maybe we'll see it at Summer Games Fest, or maybe we'll see it later in the year at this reported second PlayStation showcase that they will be doing. So yeah, that wraps up the 20 studios that we talked about, and I will say that it does seem like they're still working on a lot of great single player games currently. There's a lot that are on the way that we can be excited about. Now, it doesn't really leave much room for surprises, I will say, because we pretty much know what most of these guys are going to be working on, and the studios that we don't know, probably the games are still off quite a ways. So yeah, I don't know. Obviously we can still get surprises with like some third-party stuff, and that's probably what we're going to be leaning on for like surprises, I guess. So overall, I am a bit worried about the future of PlayStation for sure, but as we know, things can change quickly with fan feedback and the way the industry goes. So you never know if their plans will even come to fruition. Thanks for watching the video, really appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed this more in-depth video and style. Me and Sanakagy are going to work together to make this one of our like more in-depth edited videos and stuff like that. So really appreciate you tuning in and sticking around till the end if you're still here. So yeah, I appreciate you. Drop a comment and let me know which game you're most excited for in Sony's future, and if you're worried about the future of PlayStation. I'd love to know people's thoughts on this, because this is not designed to be some sort of fanboy flame war, by the way, because I mean, I love PlayStation games. I have for a while, but if they go in this direction that I don't like, then I'll call it out. You know, I'm not just gonna ride or die with them. It's not like I owe this corporation anything, I'll say. So yeah, thanks for watching, appreciate it. See you next time. It's been my pleasure to serve you all. Peace out.